Factions. Don't we love them? The amazing thing about factions is that they're always centered around either a being, an ideology, a belief, or a mixture of all the above, and even more. When we explore universes that are polytheistic, you can guarantee that each of them will have at least one faction that is dedicated to their beliefs, and against them. In rare cases, you could have multiple factions that cover different aspects of one being or their ideology. In short, I'm pretty much saying that we will have a nice field day covering topics on all of the factions that exist in the world of the Elder Scrolls. So hit the subscribe button if you are as excited as I am as I delve into these various topics. But for now, we will start with one. If you missed my last video where I covered the topic of Molag Bal, I will leave a link to it in the description below. He is known as the patron deity of vampirism, with legend stating that he was credited for making the first vampire in Tamriel. Now, this isn't unique to the universe of the Elder Scrolls, as vampires are a very popular fantasy element in movies and books, with very famous franchises such as Count Dracula and the Twilight series. First off, happy day after Valentine's Day, aka Chocolate Discount Day. I'm not sure how many of you celebrate it, but I'm always up for some discounted chocolate. Well, who isn't? I hope you have your fill of chocolate as you are watching this video, which is ironic since vampires often coincide with the romance genre of media. Now it's time to ruin the fun, because the faction we'll be covering today are pretty much enemies of vampires, at least. The main incarnation that we know them as. They didn't used to start like that, so what exactly turned them into the aggressive faction that sought to end one of the most prominent and loyal vampire clans in existence? We are now turning from romance to pure horror action as we explore today's lore video behind the Dawnguard. We know the Dawnguard to be the aggressive vampire hunters we know in the aptly named DLC for Skyrim. Refounded by Isran as a form of dissatisfaction from the Vigilant of Stendarr's role or lack of in the rise of Lord Harkon and the Volkihar clan of vampires, resulting in him abandoning the Vigilance and reforming the Dawnguard. The Dawnguard didn't actually start like this, however. The faction's origins can be traced back in the Second Era of Tamriel, where the Jarl of Riften at the time had constructed Fort Dawnguard as a means of imprisoning his own son, who was once an adventurer until he contracted vampirism. The Jarl employed a large mercenary force named the Dawnguard who was tasked to keep an eye on his son. Comparing what Riften looked like in Elder Scrolls Online, which would be around the Second Era, versus what it looks like by the events of Skyrim, it is unsurprising that the Jarl at the time had enough money not only to construct the giant fortress, but to employ a very large mercenary force, all just to look after one vampire. Likely due to the nature of their work and the possible redundancy of having so many people look after just one person, the Dawnguard had used their knowledge of vampires to expand their influence and become notable vampire hunters throughout Skyrim, effectively maintaining the growth and expansion of vampirism in the Second Era. Now, keeping a vampire, I would imagine, would be some very nasty business, let alone terrifying. So it wasn't surprising that at some point, the Dawnguard was forced to put down the Jarl's son. While nothing is detailed about how it came to this, there could be some possible theories. But it is likely that the vampire might have gotten loose at one point and started attacking the guards, forcing the hunters to kill him, or may have been deprived of food and was suffering. Regardless, the Jarl had no choice but to abandon the fort and disband the faction, now that the son is dead and he had no reason to keep either one. Then we get to a very large gap in the timeline of Tamriel where pretty much nothing is heard of the Dawnguard, and speculation and rumor with what happened to them began to spawn. The thing is, vampires tend to operate in the dark, so for the most part the general population tends to brush them aside. So when a faction like the Dawnguard declare themselves to be vampire hunters, people would think that it is simply a front to a typical bandit group simply because they haven't heard of any vampire attacks. Some even believe that after witnessing the power of vampires through their work, the Dawnguard decided to be vampires themselves until they were hunted down and killed. Regardless, there were no traces of them for a very long time. Now we fast forward into the Fourth Era, into the events of Skyrim, where a group of vampires have launched a surprise and uncharacteristic attack on the Hall of Vigilance, pretty much killing everyone in the hall at the time. Isran, a former member of the Vigilance, decided to reform the Dawnguard and station it at Fort Dawnguard. As someone who is more aggressive in nature when facing vampire threats, Isran does not believe in the more softer methods of the Vigilance, resulting in this reformation. The Dragonborn is then introduced to the Dawnguard through Durak, who is warning of the vampire threat in Skyrim, and tells the Dragonborn to make their way to Fort Dawnguard, where another recruit, Agmaer, awaits and the two go together. When they are introduced to Isran, they are told of vampire activity in Dim Hollow Crypt, where Serana is hidden along with an Elder Scroll. Afterwards, the two depart to Castle Volkihar. Of course, the Dragonborn, being the Dragonborn, has two options, and this happens after rescuing Serana. They can choose to join the vampires against the Dawnguard, or join the Dawnguard and take the fight to the vampires. Since we are covering the Dawnguard in today's video, we will go down the latter route. Very similar to the old Dawnguard, Isran revives some of their practices, such as being active vampire hunters, using their old armor style, as well as the use of crossbows, which are unique and unorthodox that the Dawnguard use and are more effective against vampires compared to the use of traditional bow and arrows. Something I found really cool about joining the Dawnguard was also the ability to not just improve crossbow technology through quests from Serene, but also the ability to recruit armored trolls to the battle. I mean, sure, being a vampire lord is cool, but I personally like the ability to bring trolls into the fray. If at any point in the game the Dragonborn contracts vampirism and are part of the faction that literally kills vampires, none of them will help you out that much until you cure yourself of the disease. Just a little cool detail there. In the events of the Dawnguard, the Dragonborn embarks on a quest to defeat Lord Harkon, with the Dawnguard serving as support, allowing the Dragonborn to grow and expand the faction through quests given by Gunmar and Serene, giving benefits and allowing more members to join the faction, as well as the fortress expanding its defense. Although this won't necessarily stop random vampires from forming small groups to launch assaults every now and again. After the Dragonborn and the Dawnguard unleash their final assault on Castle Volkhar after thwarting the tyranny of the Sun Prophecy and obtaining Oriel's bow, they destroy Clan Volkhar and the Vampire Lord himself, ending the threat of the vampires. Like many factions, the Dawnguard provides a really cool storyline that initially starts out with eliminating the threat of the vampires, but are introduced to other elements in the story that I think lead to a really cool DLC and a story to follow. As always, if you enjoyed today's entry of the Elder Scrolls lore videos, please leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content. Other than that, this is Enzo signing out, and I will see you all in the next lore video.